Hi everyone, Mike here from Bikes by Mike with another cycling related video. Today it's all about winter fat biking. I take my gear outside to demonstrate with a couple of my buddies what are the most important tips, tricks, and lessons that any beginner rider needs to know before heading out fat biking for the first time. Heck, you experienced riders may even find something useful in here. Okay, let's get to it. In today's video, I'll start off by talking a bit about the trail network where we'll be riding and why I like it for winter fat biking. I'll then cover my tips, tricks, and lessons in 3 parts. The first part will be considerations for choice of gear, specifically clothing, bike setup, and accessories, followed by a few short lessons on riding technique unique to fat biking. And then I'll wrap things up with advice on trail etiquette for both the cyclists and non-cyclists alike. Me and my 2 buddies, Norm and Mike, spent the afternoon at Jefferson Forest, located in the town of Newmarket. Jefferson Forest is a heavily wooded area on the Ork Ridges Moraine, located just north of the city of Toronto. It has 49 kilometers of mixed hiking and mountain bike trails, and a good mix of easy, intermediate, and expert routes. Anyone with a bike can find a trail suited to their riding preference. The park abuts a residential neighborhood, but once you're into the woods, you feel far removed from everything. There are no super long climbs, but you will find a lot of steep, punchy climbs throughout this park. Choose your trails wisely. While hilly can be fun, the riding resistance created by the snow and riding a heavier bike make for more exhausting riding than normal mountain biking. Most riders prefer less hilly terrain to what they would normally ride in the summer, but experiment with what works for you. Go short is a good option, or go shorter than what you normally ride in the summer months. If you have the choice of riding groomed trails over ungroomed trails, go groomed. They'll be smoother, faster, and just way more fun to ride. Unfortunately, in my area, groomed trails just aren't that common, so I usually ride ungroomed trails. Lastly, stay off the trails unless the temperature is forecasted to stay below freezing for the duration of your ride. Today, the temperature was -7 degrees Celsius when we rolled out, so we were good to ride. So remember, choose wisely, go short, ride groomed, and only ride in freezing temps. To capture all this footage, we shared the duties. I operated the handheld video camera and had an Insta360 action camera mounted to my handlebars. Norm operated the drone, and Mike took all the photographs. It took us about twice as long as we expected to film, probably because Norm couldn't stop talking about how much weight he gained on his last vacation.
I'll grab some fat off my belly.
And I was reaching for my maple syrup every 10 minutes. Oh, and Mike was thinking about how to secure his bike to his rooftop rack so it doesn't fly off for the 3rd time. Plus, we had to stop to take a leak every 2 minutes, so that added another half hour to our ride. But we were well hydrated, which is really important when riding in the cold. Before I headed out, I made sure I had the proper gear. As for clothing, you can get away with not dressing properly in warm weather, but not in sub-zero winter riding. You need to layer up so that you can add and remove layers as necessary. And while not wearing enough clothes isn't good, wearing too much is just as bad, especially if you're wearing layers that don't breathe well. If you're too warm, you'll sweat, you'll get damp, and you'll get cold quickly, not to mention be really uncomfortable. Always wear a buff around your neck and an insulated skull cap on your head. They don't weigh much, are super comfortable, and if you get too warm on your ride, they easily stow in a pocket. Keep your head covered and warm, and it'll warm up the rest of your body. And I always use a merino wool top as the first layer that touches my skin. Also, I usually avoid using waterproof gear unless it's needed, as it never breathes as well as clothing that is just wind or water resistant. And since you never have to worry about rain when riding in sub-zero temperatures, getting wet isn't your biggest concern. Also, your extremities will get colder faster than the rest of your body, so make sure to use a warm pair of winter cycling shoes or boots. I prefer shoes to boots as they have stiffer soles, so you lose less power on the pedal stroke. I often add thermal shoe covers over top, which adds warmth and moisture protection, but use whatever you like. You can buy heated cycling boots or buy heated inserts like what Norm uses with his 45 North cycling boots. For my hands, I typically use cycling-specific winter gloves as opposed to lobster claw gloves or mitts, as I don't want a strict movement of my fingers. Using oversized gloves or mitts will make it difficult to grab your handlebars, brakes, and shifters, and cause your fingers to tire more quickly, especially if riding aggressively on hilly terrain. Pogies are not a bad idea, as they provide so much warmth that you can get away with wearing a very light pair of gloves. On really cold days below -10 degrees Celsius, I'll use both feet and hand warmers right off the bat. But even on mild days, I keep a pair of hand warmers in my jersey pocket, just in case I get caught out in colder weather than expected. The bike. There are lots of considerations when it comes to the bike, but by far, the most important consideration is the choice of tires. Everything else is a distant second. You need to choose your preferred tire width, tread pattern, and studded versus non-studded. And there are a lot of options to choose from. You can see that Norm, Mike, and I are each using different tires with different specs. When it comes to tire widths, ranges range from 3.8 inches to 5 inches and come in both 26-inch and 27.5-inch diameter rim versions. I've used narrow and wider fat bike tires, and there isn't that much difference in performance within the size range. Yes, 4.6-inch tires do provide a little bit more traction in the deep snow, but it's not a night and day difference. I like using 3.8-inch tires, as we don't get a ton of snow in southern Ontario, and they do roll a bit faster. For tread pattern, again, you can choose a bigger, knobbier tire that'll get a bit better traction in the snow, or what I'm using, which are ones with smaller knobs that roll with a bit less resistance. But by far, the most important consideration is whether to run tires with or without studs. If there's any chance you'll encounter ice on the trail, studs are an absolute must. If you've ever slipped and crashed on ice, you know how badly it hurts. So why take the risk? The trails in the Greater Toronto Area usually have ice on them, as we are constantly going through freeze and thaw cycles. So for 90% of my riding, I need studs. Plus, I've ridden with and without studs, and the extra rolling resistance created by the studs is negligible. So much so that I got rid of my non-studded tires. If you need to replace worn out studs or want to add studs to studdable tires, I have a video on that with a link in the description below. A survival kit. If you're frequently riding by yourself or riding in large remote areas, you should consider carrying a survival kit. Here Norm has included an emergency blanket that can double as a tarp, and he has a Ziploc bag filled with heavy-duty matches and small kindling sticks covered with wax. Those are the two most important items to include, but you should add more to the kit if doing more adventurous fat biking in more remote areas. Then again, Norm brings a survival kit and a book that looks something like this to our 8-hour mountain bike races, so maybe this is all just overkill. You decide. Okay, we've picked our preferred trails, we've got the right gear, the temperature is right, it's time to ride. We roll out of the parking lot into Jefferson Forest. It's always a good idea when you first start riding to go slow and easy until you get your legs going and have time to assess the snow conditions. Often falls happen early in a ride before you've had a chance to get used to the riding conditions. When it comes to riding technique, you need to take a slightly different approach than normal mountain biking. First, mind your cadence and torque. Everybody's pedaling cadence is different, as well as the amount of torque they can apply to the pedals. But regardless of your pedaling style and pedaling efficiency, it needs to be modified when fat biking through snow. While you can still get a lot of traction in the snow, you won't get as much as with summer riding. To maximize grip, think about just one thing: pedal smoothly. What defines a smooth pedal stroke? It's one that maintains the same foot speed throughout each of the 4 distinct quadrants of the pedal stroke. From 1 to 5 o'clock is the downstroke. From 5 to 7 o'clock is the pullback. Between 7 and 11 o'clock is the upstroke. And finally, from 11 to 1 o'clock is the setup. The tendency for beginner cyclists is to apply far more power on the downstroke than in the other 3 quadrants. This improper pedaling technique is referred to by the less than glamorous terms of pedaling in squares or mashing on the pedals. There are lots of practice drills you can do to smooth out your pedaling technique, but forget about all that for now. Do these 2 things while fat biking and it'll force you to naturally pedal more smoothly. First, choose a higher, harder gear than what you normally ride, especially while climbing. This is a bit counterintuitive, as by choosing a harder gear, you'll be applying more force or torque to the pedals. But the key is that you'll also slow down your cadence. This combination of a slow rotation of the pedals and higher torque will help prevent the sudden accelerations you see on downstrokes when riders are pedaling in squares. Since you are already close to your limit on how much force you can apply to the pedals, you simply won't be able to produce sudden, quick changes in your pedaling stroke. It is these sudden, quick changes in acceleration that causes you to lose traction in snow and ice. Try it. Second, stay seated as much as possible, especially when climbing. Staying seated has two benefits that improves grip. By climbing seated, you'll be putting all your weight over the back wheel, which is the one that produces all forward motion. Second, pedaling smoothly is easier to do while seated than out of the saddle. Riders generally have a hard time maintaining a smooth pedaling stroke while out of the saddle. There'll be times you need to get out of the saddle because you can't generate enough torque while seated, but consciously think about keeping a smooth pedal stroke. Finesse your turns. With normal mountain biking, you can get a bit more aggressive with your turns. You can place more weight forward and rely on front wheel traction to carve the turn. With winter fat biking, your weight must be more neutral and centered on the bike, and you need to finesse the turn. You certainly don't want your weight as far back as when descending, but you do want to feel like you have more of your weight on your back wheel than the front. If you try to load up the front wheel when entering a turn, it'll just slide out from under you, especially in powder or soft pack conditions. So keep your front wheel in control on your turns and you'll come out the other side safely and carrying momentum. Climb and descend with confidence. The great thing about fat bikes is that the wider tires provide a lot of traction, so you can go up and down hills you wouldn't think possible. So take advantage of those 3.8 inch or 5.8 inch wide tires and push those steep climbs and descents. And since your front tire is so wide, you can really go heavy on the front brake on steep descents to control your speed. The fourth and final category of fat biking tips I'll cover is trail etiquette. Let's start with the least controversial one and end with the most, which will generate the most debate. Use the correct tire pressure. If the trail conditions are right and you're using the proper size tires, and you still find that you're leaving ruts on the trail, there's a good chance your tires are not inflated to the proper tire pressure. Proper tire pressure depends on several factors, including rider weight, tire size, and trail conditions. So experiment with what works best for you. But here's a rough guideline to get you started. Provided you're not dropping your tire pressure to the point that you bottom out the rim, you can gain a lot more traction without much increase in rolling resistance by dropping the tire pressure. Again, this will take a bit of trial and error to get dialed in perfectly. Use no less than 3.8 inch wide tires. As I mentioned earlier, fat bike tires come in a variety of sizes from 3.8 inches to 5 inches. Many trail organizations prohibit winter riding with tires less than 3.8 inches. But even if it's not outright prohibited, trail etiquette says that you shouldn't. The only time is okay to ride snow-covered mountain bike trails with standard 2.4 inch wide mountain bike tires is if the trails are icy or hard-packed to the point where skinnier tires won't leave ruts. So avoid evil glares by fat bikers by staying off your mountain bike when the trail conditions tell you to. Don't ride in above freezing temperatures. If the temperature rises above 0 degrees Celsius, stay off the trails. Whether the trails are groomed or not, riding when the snow is melting will always leave behind ruts. And these ruts, once frozen over, will make for horrible riding. So show some love to your fellow fat bikers, trail builders, and groomers, and stay off the trails in mild weather. Yield to others on the trail. When you're passing other trail users, there are 3 important rules to remember. Cyclists yield to hikers, downhill users yield to uphill users, and make your presence known. But it all boils down to not being a jerk to other trail users. Let's see these 3 rules in action. Here I'm approaching a fat biker standing on the side of the trail. Since we're moving quite quickly and I want to be sure he sees me, I say,
Rider, take it.
When you want to pass another rider or cyclist from behind, you should always announce your presence and indicate which side you want to pass. So say something like, rider passing on your left, or just on your left. The fewer words, the better. I now approach the second rider as I'm descending. Normally I would yield to the uphill rider, but in this case they are already pulling off the trail. I simply announce the number of riders in our group so that they know when it's safe to move on. I say,
2 behind.
Here's another situation. Norm, Mike, and I are pulled off of the side of the trail to let the approaching riders pass. There are 4 in the group. The first 2 go by, and then I exchange the following words with the third rider.
Thank you, guys. Hey, no problem. One more?
The last rider in the group should always announce to those waiting that they are the last one, which is what this fine rider does perfectly.
Last one. Okay, thanks.
Okay, everything I've mentioned so far on trail etiquette has applied to fat bikers. Let me now talk to those of you not on a fat bike. The simple rule is, don't post hole through a trail. The same rule applies to cross-country ski trails. Most of the trails used by fat bikers are multi-use trails. They get used by a variety of people for a variety of recreational uses. So we, as fat bikers, need to be respectful to the non-cyclists using the trails, and non-cyclists need to be respectful of cyclists that also want to enjoy them. Posting a hole is the act of hiking on groomed or ungroomed trails without snowshoes, leaving behind footprints that resemble fence post holes. The problem is that these footholes ruin the trail for cyclists and everyone else really. I've seen groomers finish off a hard day's work just to have one hiker walk through them all, ruining them for everyone else. If you've ever ridden on trails with deep footprints, you know how unenjoyable it is to ride in these conditions. It's wrong, and it's 100% preventable if hikers and walkers just strap on a pair of snowshoes before heading out on snow-covered trails. Not only is it better for everyone, it'll make your hiking more enjoyable. Try it. Oh, this doesn't apply to our cute furry trail dogs. They're so light they never do any damage to the trails. Plus with those tiny little paws, their snowshoes would have to be like this size, right? Who rocks in the trail world? Snowshoers. Because they're doing their part to keep the trails in good condition for everyone else that uses them. That's why I never ride past a snowshoer without thanking them.
Hey, David.
Hey, Mike.
That's a bonus bit of trail etiquette. Always thank snowshoers. So here again are my top 6 trail etiquette practices. Do these things all the time and everyone will get along just fine. So that is pretty much it for my top tips, tricks, and lessons on how to make the most of your winter fat biking. I couldn't cover everything in this video, but I hope I got to the most important ones. Let me know in the comments section if there's anything important I missed. That's all I got for today, folks. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you're not a subscriber to this channel, please subscribe, as it will allow me to produce more content for all of you. See you next time. Happy rolling.